Hello, everyone, and welcome to Makai-World Reviews. Who am I? Well, I'm obviously the Tony Makai. I'm Master of Minds and of Men. And for the month of November, that is I, with you listening, will be going through prison films, however loosely I use that term, and loosely still, as today I'm looking at The Great Escape. Is it a prison movie? You decide. You know, I go from Paul Newman to Steve McQueen. I'm really going through the classic super hunks, huh? Well, anyway, hit that subscribe button, and let's go ahead and try to get over that wall. The Great Escape, directed by John Sturges, a classic director. I mean, Gunfight at the OK Corral, The Magnificent Seven, Hour of the Gun, Ice Station Zebra. The man has just that early cinema feel, that grit and honesty, that American cinema classic. I miss that. Written by James Clavell, worked on the 1958 The Fly, starring, of course, Vincent Price, Five Gates of Hell, which I enjoyed, and lots of others. Mostly lesser-known films, but obviously a talented guy. Also, W.R. Burnett, a novelist that worked on an absolute metric shit ton of films, including the 1932 Scarface, among many more. It's based on the book by Paul Brickhill, and of course, based on a true story, as much as it can be. Starring Steve McQueen, the king of cool himself, hard living, hard drinking, hard driving, a pretty cool guy who put in some great performances in the cinema as well, such as The Magnificent Seven, The Cincinnati Kid, and The Towering Inferno, among others. And James Gardner, the man who wrote verses to the presidential anthem, also Maverick, Jim Rockford. He was a regular hard-nosed fellow who brought a lot of charm to every role he had, and he had a lot, working from the 50s until the mid-noughts. And the release date for this was July 4th, 1963. What came out the same day? Blood Feast. It might be the first real splatter film. It's a genuinely bad movie, but man, I get a kick out of it. It's amateur on every level, but you see the threads of it in movies we would get in the next few decades, you know? And Harbor Lights, a fairly mediocre murder romp that runs barely an hour and doesn't do much to fill even that up. Let's go over to the plot. 1942, a Nazi POW camp, and we are getting some new recruits. We don't get a lot of mucking about as all of these guys get together to plan a prompt escape, with one British Roger Bartlett leading the charge. He intends to make sure 250 men escape from this camp, and he's going to use 3 tunnels, digging about 300 odd feet each to do it. Bartlett knows a good portion of the men there, and the ones he doesn't know are quickly happy to participate in this cleverly constructed and very complicated plan. Of course, they begin running into issues that need to be overcome, such as the commandant of the camp cracking down on escapes as much as he can, in fear of losing his cushy position at such a tenuous place in the war. Really, he just wants to ride the war out in this job as quietly and peacefully as he can. What to do with all the increasing amount of dirt they are amassing from all this digging. Cleverly, they use bags down their trousers that they spread across places where the POWs are farming. Well done, and one we've seen aped in other films. Needing to get contemporary papers, passports, etc. to expert forger Colin Blythe. Thankfully, American Flight Lieutenant Bob Henley befriends and swindles a German officer for them. The increasing tension among the men, including Polish Danny Walensky's claustrophobia and Archie Ives getting ready to crack. Also, what is on the other side of the tree line? What will they run into? Well, this last one will be helped by one man, hot-headed American Virgil Hiltz, who doesn't necessarily play well with others and is constantly being placed in isolation due to the fact he escapes as frequently as he can. He's initially wary of helping the others, only really worrying about getting himself out. But that changes when, during a 4th of July celebration, the Nazis find one of the tunnels, causing the previously mentioned Archie to finally crack, and he gets himself killed. This changes Hilt's mind, and he breaks out, sees what's on the other side of the trees, and promptly gets himself captured, having information now to help out. This leads to the final big push, and with Hilt's knowledge and help, 76 men actually make it out before the Nazis figure out what's going on, and they lay the hammer down. So not the 250 they wanted, hey, but that's not bad either. They all split up, and we get a series of little montages of everything and everyone trying to escape and how most of them were caught and or killed, such as Blythe, who is now blind, with Henley traversing by train, which they jump off of. They then steal a plane, which they crash. Finally, though, Blythe is shot and dies in his friend's arms, and Henley is captured. Bartlett being captured after the man he was traveling with accidentally gets caught up on a Nazi speaking English to him, something Bartlett had admonished him for earlier in the film. They are both captured. Incident in a train yard, leaving one of the POWs dead and the rest captured. Hiltz famously tries to jump a stolen motorcycle over a razor wire fence to freedom and is promptly captured. We don't see all of those who get away or are captured. We do see most of their fates, as 50 of the POWs are lined up and gunned down in a field. Hiltz does arrive back in the camp there to see the commandant being deposed of his position, probably never to be seen again, and Hiltz is placed back where he seemingly belongs, in isolation. Now, I had to cut down a lot in that overview, but I promise I also have a lot to talk about here. I usually start with directing and cinematography. I'm going to continue that. This is a nice-looking film, a really nice-looking film. It's bright. We see beautiful countrysides in this part of Poland. It's never a dark-looking film. Even the POW camp looks well-maintained. It's almost optimistic-looking, almost. It's also got these nice shots there, mostly static with quick, sharp cuts that work in a movie that slowly builds its tension. The costumes are period appropriate as needed. Not perfect, but there's no obvious flaws. Generally, this is a really well-directed and well-shot film. It has that classic kind of American style of filmmaking you might expect from a movie like this. I want to talk about the portrayal of the Nazis in this movie. This, much like the rest of the film, is a slow burn from people like the commandant, who clearly does not like being a Nazi, and who at several points expresses he just wants to ride out this war here, in this job, not see any action, not have any BS. We see the guards of the camp are reasonable enough for what they are. They are courteous in their own way, if not entirely rigid. These are people who we have to see every day, so let's just get through this while still being, Nazis. This changes as we see an increasing violence once the men are on the outside, more cruelty, manipulation, a more classical exploration of the Nazi mentality, until finally, the horrific murder of 50 good men, who, as we are told, it's their job to try to escape. Wouldn't you? I think it was very well tempered. We didn't get anyone wringing their hands coldly, but we see that callousness, officious nature of their attitude towards human life, a subtle but well-done take here, and a nice, slow pacing. Speaking of the pacing of this movie, you would expect some slowness at its length of almost 3 hours, and we get some of that, we feel some of that, but there are honestly almost no wasted moments. There are moments that could conceivably be cut realistically, but everyone got their time to shine. It's an ensemble film. But I was not bored for 1 second in this movie. Tension slowly increased as it goes on, and you can feel it in the characters, you can feel it in the action. Everything gets tighter, quite literally with the digging tighter. And there's this kind of release after the escape, only for things to clamp down even harder, tension-wise. It's quite gripping, and I was pushed to the edge of my proverbial seat a few moments. Now, the big one, the characters and their interpersonal relationships. This is a huge ensemble film. Tried to name as many intricate characters as I could to keep my overview brisk, but there's so much going on. Everyone that knows one another interacts, and it feels sincere. I'll talk about some of my favorite interactions and characters and moments, etc. James Garner as Flight Lieutenant Bob Henley has two relationships I want to talk about. He himself is classic James, strong, charming, a swindler at heart, real smooth. He befriends a Nazi guard, and their first introduction is great. The guard talks about, how can you be friends with an English? They burnt down your capital in the War of 1812. Henley just dismisses it, calling it propaganda. He said that war never happened. After this, he manipulates the guy with chocolate, steals his passport. It's what they used to do the forgeries with, but it's not like he's treated like a total idiot. He kind of bonds with Henley, and they both were Boy Scouts before the guard had to become a Hitler Youth. He fears being sent to the Russian front line. His other friendship was with Donald Pleasance's Flight Lieutenant Colin Blythe, the forger who goes blind. The blind thing kind of came out of nowhere, but it gives these two an obstacle to overcome. And we have seen these two be friends before. They're playing chess and other things. It's nice to see that they work with Blythe, needing help. And they get far. I mean, they jump from a train, they steal a plane, and Blythe's death really hits hard, dying while his friend holds him. Steve McQueen as Captain Virgil Hiltz is labeled as the star of the movie, but that's not totally correct. He movie far less than most of the ensemble cast, but that's actually to the strength of the character. He's brash, he's solo. He doesn't make or keep many friends. He's easy to anger, easy to action. He's a man with a singular vision for himself, and he will help anyone else, but he isn't quite as worried. He does a good bit of the workload of the action, especially in the third act. The stuff on the bike was incredible, and no matter how many times I see this, I root for him to get over that fence. He nailed this. His cocky smile but determined eyes make this character so memorable. Also, my favorite moment with him is when him and a few others get all the potatoes they had grown to make, hooch to everyone on 4th of July. I loved it. Charles Bronson, James Coburn, and a few others were all of note. Bronson being claustrophobic, But being the main one to dig the tunnel was memorable, and Koberg being one of the few we see escape was nice. But really, the person who I got the most out of was Richard Attenborough's squadron leader, Roger Bartlett. He had such passion. His character, from the first moment we see him, had these eyes of a man possessed, and as soon as he arrives, he makes the plan to escape. He is in charge of it all. He puts everyone to task. And we see the pain this man feels at every failure and the hope in these men when they escape. He is so grateful and he does well. But when they are caught, he is frantic. He's mad. We see this rage. When he gives up, it crushed me. It really did. It was so hopeful. I was like, he's going to get away. Everything he went through, all this planning, all this, and he ends up fucking dead. He was the heart and soul of this movie, and goddamn did he do an amazing job. Beyond that, there was one really silly, borderline cartoonish scene when people try to escape dressed as Russian workers. They're caught instantly, and the Nazi stabs a barrel of cut-down plants with a pitchfork, and the guys get out. It's really silly. Music, banger, easily. I'm going to start with Gaspard Teague Catton, which was used by The Great Escape, homages like Hogan's Heroes, and the fantastic cartoon Recess. So overall, a really well-done soundtrack that never once took away from any scene and only added to the tension, the humor, and the overall quality of the movie. Overall, speaking of which, I wish I had something bad to say about this movie. I guess some of the digging scenes can go on for a bit long, but this is a great film, genuinely. It's one that rewards you for paying attention. But you can also casually watch it. It's a compelling movie, and really, I don't have a ton more to say about it, except, and I preface this saying, I'm not a particularly patriotic person. I suppose this was men of all nations fighting against evil. This review was dedicated to the 50 brave men who wanted freedom and died for it. Thank you for never giving up until that very end. Well, that was The Great Escape. You may have noticed this reviews are back-to-back, but I've been terribly ill. I'm sorry. So next up is going to be One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, a movie I personally love. So stick around, kiddos, and of course, subscribe, add me on the grams, all that good stuff. Also, please take care of yourself and love the ones around you. I love you. And that's from me, Daytona Makai, Master of Minds and of Men.